Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. And everyone, welcome into the program. I hope that you're doing well and you are ready for today's show because we have the one and the only Mr. Ralph Bond. He'll be joining us here in just a moment to talk about four, and I do not use these words lightly, amazing stories. They are cutting edge. They are, stuff that I can guarantee that you have not heard, definitely on Computer America, but of course in a lot of other publications. These things are far out there, but they're very, very cool. And I can't think of a better way to start off a Friday than with Ralph Bond. So with that being said, computeramerica.com, that's where we'll find everything. Pardon our dust, we're actually moving over to a new web hosting service. And as someone who has not done this before, because, Craig had some very smart people do this for us last time. I'm trying to do it myself because I'm like, hey, I'm a technology guy. I can handle this. To all people out there that work networking and database management and all that kind of thing, I applaud you in the highest manner because either that or I curse you because it is so confusing and convoluted. Shame on all of you. That's probably more accurate. So shame on all of you. Everyone, so computeramerica.com, it'll be up there though. The show notes will be up there. Everything will be accessible. You'll be able to find it very easy. We have all of Ralph's past shows, future shows. And of course, if there's ever a problem with the website, YouTube is usually a bit more reliable at staying up than our site. And of course, you can find us on social media. So with that being said, let's go ahead, bring Ralph on and get started. And of course, he's been a long-time contributor. He has become our science and technology trends correspondent, where he talks about all things science, technology, and therein that touches, turns out that's a little bit of everything. So Ralph, welcome back onto Computer America. How you been?
It's great. It's great to be back. And I'll tell you what, let's set the stage for people, especially if you're a first-time listener or viewer. And remember, if you're listening to us as a podcast, please come out to computeramerica.com, get the link to the YouTube posting, but also get the show notes where we have links and pictures and additional information for each of the four stories we're going to do. And what Ben and I do each Friday is look at where we're headed in artificial intelligence, robotics, medical technology, sustainable energy technology, transportation advances, space research, physics, you name it, across the board. It's all available for us to look at. And what we're going to do here is give you an oasis of positive news thanks to the world of science and technology. That's what we do every Friday.
And you do a very good job of it. So for those out there who are watching and follow along, by the time that you hear this, you will be able to see the show notes. But for everyone else, just sit back, relax, and listen as we jump into story number one. And, it's Ralph, there's always these kinds of stories that come out every couple of years. One is how intelligent are bees? And it's like, oh, they're more intelligent than we thought. And then there's how emotionally intelligent are animals? And they're more they're more emotionally intelligent than we thought. Little stories like that. It's always more than we think. And year over year, it's up to science to really determine how much is more, because you can't just say more. It has to have a number. This is now the brains time with story number one.
Yeah, story number one is great. Comes from livescience.com. This is mind-blowing, no pun intended. Headline: The brain can store nearly 10 times more data than previously thought. A new study confirms. Wow, let that sink in. 10 times. Okay, so here's the story. A team of scientists from the University of California, San Diego, Salk Institute for Biological Sciences, and University of Texas, Austin, recently published research results showing that the brain may be able to hold nearly 10 times more information than previously thought. And what we're going to have to do, this is very, very geeky story here, folks. And to really geek out, you need to come to the source article and to their published paper and so on to dig deeper. But we're going to give you the highlights here and go into just the basics for you. So there are some tutorial things we need to cover to understand the full scope of the story. So here we go. Similar to computers, the brain's memory storage is measured in bits, and the number of bits it can hold rests on the connections between its neurons, known as synapses. In the human brain, this is great. In the human brain, there are more than 100 trillion synapses between neurons, and chemical messengers are launched across these synapses, facilitating the transfer of information across the brain. A little reminder here, 1 trillion is 1 million millions. So our brains have over 100 million millions synapses.
To put it in something that may put in a bit easier perspective is imagine 50 NVIDIAs. Yeah, that's how many synapses your brain has. About 50 NVIDIAs. So
there you go. I like that. That's good. And here's another side note for us here. Unlike classical computers that use binary code, of course, zeros and ones, brain cells employ 26 different ways to encode their informational bits, as it were. And researchers have calculated that the brain could potentially store 1 petabyte or 1 quadrillion bytes of information. Oh my goodness. And in the show notes, I give you the source for that particular data point. And that's a little point I want to raise. In the show notes, what I do is I take the highlights from the articles, but sometimes I insert additional tutorial information because the articles are written for a scholarly audience often, and they assume you know these things. Well, Mr. Layperson here, I'll go, well, what does this mean? What's that all about? And I'll go out and add additional information. So this is a good example of that in the show notes. Going back to the story now, historically, scientists thought synapses came in a fairly limited number of sizes and strengths, and this in turn limited the brain's storage capacity. However, this theory has been challenged in recent years, and the new study we're talking about today further backs the idea that the brain can hold about 10-fold more than once thought. And in the new study, the researchers developed a highly precise method to assess the strength of connections between neurons in part of a rat's brain. Soapbox segue for a moment here. Thank you, rats and mice, for your infinite contributions to science and research. These little guys, we owe them a lot. Now, these synapses form the basis of learning and memory as brain cells communicate at these points and thus store and share information. And more background here, as we learn over time as human beings, as we learn, the transfer of information through specific synapses increases. This strengthening of synapses enables us to retain the new information in the form of memory, okay? In general, synapses strengthen or weaken in response to how active their constituent, or I can't say this today, constituent, that's a toughie.
Constituent, yeah.
Thank you. Neurons are, so response to how active their neurons are, a phenomenon called synaptic plasticity. I love that. The next time I go to a neurologist appointment, I'm going to say, what about my synaptic plasticity?
Yeah, could you measure that? And as much as I never want to admit that my 6th grade math teacher was correct, that's the reason studying does help. So, yeah, make them active, strengthen them.
It's just like physical training, right? You're a runner, you go out and you run every day, you do exercises and so forth. We need exercises for our brain for a
perfect analogy, for sure.
For synaptic plasticity. Got to have it. So, no surprise this coming up here. However, as we age or develop neurological diseases such as Alzheimer's, our synapses become less active and thus weaken, reducing cognitive performance and our ability to store and retrieve memories. Is so interesting. I mean, there's a physical way to explain that kind of phenomenon. To measure synaptic strength and plasticity, the team harnessed information theory. a mathematical way of understanding how information is transmitted through a system. This approach also enables scientists to quantify how much information can be transmitted across the synapses while also taking account of the background noise of the brain. And then I'm not going to read through this, but in the show notes, I inserted another one of these Help Ralph Understand This tutorials. What is information theory? You can come to the show notes, read all about it. It's very, very interesting. It goes back to the 1920s, by the way. And again, come to the show notes at computeramerica.com. You can get that additional information, but very interesting. Now, the problem with tenfold more capacity than we previously thought in the old noodle here is that it destroys my arguments with my wife about memory loss and other things of this nature. It should be, wait a minute, you've got 10 times more capability. Why are you screwing up here, buddy?
It's such a hard thing to kind of quantify. It almost reminds me, Ralph, of when babies kind of learn to walk. And, we're like, oh, it's just walking. We all do it. You go outside and you see 1,000 people walking a day, whatever. Walking is like one of the hardest things that you can ever do. Like every robot, Ralph, that we kind of talk about on the show, and, especially like the humanoid bipedal robots, man, walking is just so complicated. And your brain's just like, I got this. And, babies learn to walk so quickly. It's amazing, just not just walking, but like our brains and how active and plastic they are. Yeah, but yeah, there you go. So there you go. Story number one, really mind expanding in all senses of the word. Story number two. Let's go ahead and talk about inkjet printing and whatever a multispectral 3D camera is. So story number two.
Yes, this headline, of course, immediately grabbed my attention. It comes from phys.org, phys, or short for physics. The headline here: researchers leverage inkjet printing, to make a portable multispectral 3D camera. Well, that headline alone has a what? What is that? What, inkjet printing? Wait a minute. What is a multispectral 3D camera? We're going to go all through this, okay? So to fully understand how inkjet printing mechanics were used to create this breakthrough camera, you should go and look at their research paper, their formal paper. I have a link for that, of course, in the show notes. Check that out. But with that said, let's get into the story. Researchers at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in Germany have used inkjet printing to create the key optical components needed to make a compact multispectral version of a light field camera. Oh my gosh, there's a mouthful of what? Let's get into it. The camera, which fits in the palm of the hand, could be useful for many applications, including autonomous driving, classification of recycled materials, and remote sensing. And we'll learn about even more possibilities. Now, here's a side note. I will read this because we've got to know this to understand the story. So what is a multispectral light field camera? Okay, a multispectral camera captures images in different bands of the light spectrum beyond what our eyes can see. This means that it can capture information in colors we cannot normally perceive. Multispectral imaging involves capturing image data within specific wavelength ranges across the electromagnetic spectrum, and these wavelengths may be separated by filters or detected using instruments sensitive to particular wavelengths, including light beyond the visible range, such as good old infrared and ultraviolet. Okay, so that's what these cameras do. They look at that part of the band that we can't see. Now, 3D spectral information can be useful for classifying objects and materials. However, to date, and here's the problem, to date, capturing 3D spatial and spectral information from a scene typically requires multiple devices or time-intensive scanning processes. That's the problem. Now, the new single device that these folks in Germany have come up with, this new single device light field camera solves this challenge by simultaneously acquiring 3D information and spectral data in a single snapshot. So to date, multiple devices, time-intensive scanning process to even pull this off, to get a combination of 3D and spectral information for the bands of light we can't see, was a messy, multi-step, multi-object process. Now we're talking about a single device that fits in the palm of your hand that can acquire 3D information and spectral data in a single snapshot. That's the big breakthrough here.
That's a huge breakthrough.
Yeah, it's very cool. And research team leader Uli Lemmer noted, quote, "To our knowledge, this is the most advanced and integrated version of a multispectral light field camera. We combined it with new, of course, AI. We combined it with new AI methods for reconstructing, the depth and spectral properties of the scene to create an advanced sensor system for acquiring 3D information." And then now, if you really want to geek out, come to the show notes, because in the journal Optics Express, the researchers report, and we have a link to that paper, that the use of inkjet printing to make the camera's key optical components allows it to be easily customized or manufactured in large volumes. And my little take on this is you have to check out the article for more about how this inkjet process was used. Because when I think of inkjet, I think of the printer that's in my office right now, and I think, well, how could this... What? Anyway, you got to dive deep into the geekdom of the article to get this understanding. And then Michael Heisman, a member of the research team, noted reconstructed 3D data from camera images are finding widespread use in virtual and augmented reality, autonomous cars, robotics, smart home devices, remote sensing, and other applications. This new technology could, for example, allow robots to better interact with humans or improve the accuracy of classifying and separating materials in recycling. It could also be potentially used to classify healthy and diseased tissues. So this camera breakthrough is just remarkable. Again, being able to deal with that bands of the light spectrum we can't see and 3D information all in one product, all into the palm of your hand. Pretty great stuff.
That and not to jump on the AI bandwagon with everyone else, but they have an image in the article that you linked that shows kind of the multispectral and the blue, the green, the red, the near infrared.
Right.
They show all that, and Ralph, you can imagine that with AI being trained and being fed this data, not only is it just seeing, kind of what we see, but it'll show things that even we don't see, and it'll be able to use that information, incorporate it into what it's doing, and then make a decision based on, much more information than humans could ever do.
Yep.
Like, Ralph, it's like little things like this that are going to make, AI better at certain jobs than humans can ever be. So... Very cool stuff.
As the article says itself, Ben, it kind of concludes with saying it's the idea of this new breakthrough spectral camera, 3D spectral camera, combined with its use within robotics. That equals a very exciting possibility down the road.
Absolutely. There's so many good possibilities, and this is definitely uplifting. This is the kind of thing that you want to hear just get easier, and like Ralph, sometimes like it's not even new technology or technology that we don't have access to. It's like this. It's just the democratization of technology and being able to put it in more places. That's a huge breakthrough in and of itself. So
Absolutely.
Perfect story. Story number 2. Story number 3. Let's go ahead and talk about medical technology. And spoiler alert, story number 4 is also going to be medical technology.
Yes.
So medical from here on out. But for those who have vision problems, and as someone who grew up with glasses for 20 years, about 20 years. Boy, Ralph, like I remember the day after I got my laser eye surgery that I was like, I spent 20 years buying glasses, wearing glasses, losing glasses, breaking glasses, dropping glasses, scratching glass. I destroyed a lot of glasses. And Ralph, I'm like, that procedure took like 10 minutes and I am good for a lifetime. That's fixing remarkable. Vision is such a huge boon for so many people. And like mine was just like, cosmetic kind of, but like, I can imagine those who have much worse vision, vision that cannot be repaired just with lasers, but, needs something a little bit more. It provides so much to them. So story number 3, a little bit hopeful and medical. Let's do it.
Oh, yeah. Story number 3 is profound, and it's a good example of a trend. One of the things we should have mentioned, or I should have mentioned at the outset, is that a lot of what we talk about is early research that has the potential to take us to new and exciting vistas of advancements. And this is a good example. This story comes from medicalexpress.com. Headline: Researchers report exceptionally small implant for future vision correction. Well, of course, I had to read that one.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the story. Oh, a little side note before the news, a bit of background on electrodes and vision restoration implants. We need this, as the creation of tiny, infinitesimally tiny electrodes is key to this breakthrough story. So with that said, here's a little bit of background that I do need to provide. In vision implants, electrodes serve a crucial role in stimulating the retina or visual cortex. When someone is blind due to eye damage, their brain's visual cortex may still function, right? Just because the retina is damaged doesn't mean that the whole system is damaged, right? By sending electrical impulses via an implant, these electrodes create an image. Each electrode represents, you can think of it conceptually as a pixel, allowing the brain to perceive simplified black and white version of the visual input, meaning the world around you. Okay, so now with that little tutorial aside, here's the big news. A group of researchers from, and I always love collaborations, a group of researchers from Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden, the University of Freiburg, and the Netherlands Institute for Neuroscience, this team have created an exceptionally small implant with electrodes the size of a single neuron. Electrodes the size of a single neuron that can remain intact in the body over time. And that breakthrough sentence equals a unique combination that holds promise for the future implants for the blind. So this is the early research with great promise and hope. Now, says here, electrodes the size of a single neuron. So I said, well, what is a neuron usually? What size is it? So a little side note, a single neuron typically has a cell body with a diameter ranging from 4 to 100 micrometers. And remember, a micrometer is 1 millionth of a meter. Sometimes you'll hear it pronounced as micrometer. So the vision implant outlined in this study can be described as a thread with many electrodes placed in a row, one after the other. In the long term, go ahead.
Just want to say for everyone out there watching the video portion, you can see it there on the left of the image that we're showing.
There you go.
Yeah, and for everyone else out there, imagine like notches on a belt. It's kind of like that, except obviously 1 millionth of a meter long. But yeah, very very slender with little notches on a ribbon. So yeah,
they must have used a heck of a microscope to get that information. By the way, or that image, I should say. So in the long term, you would need several threads with thousands of electrodes connected to each one. And the results of this study are a key step toward such a vision restoration implant. That's the crux of the news, the excitement about this. By creating an electrode the size of a single neuron, researchers have the potential to fit lots of electrodes onto a single implant and build up a more detailed image for the user. Oh, wow. Now, this is where it's going to get a little geeky, folks, okay? And I'm going to gloss over this. The papers and the research information will really give it to you if you're a super geek and you want to find out. But here's the deal. The key advancement is the unique mix of flexible, non-corrosive materials that make this a long-term solution, potentially, for vision implants. Now, my comment here is one of the challenges the team faced was dealing with corrosion of the metal component used for these tiny electrodes. As the article points out, corrosion of metals in surgical implants is a huge problem. And because the metal is a functional part as well as the corroding part of the tiny experimental electrodes these folks have come up with, the amount of metal used is key. So corrosion's a problem, and how do we solve this problem so that this implant can be a long-term implant, okay? So the electrical implant the team has created measures a minuscule 40 micrometers wide and 10 micrometers thick, like a split hair, with the metal parts being only a few hundred nanometers in thickness. That's a billionth of a meter, by the way. Any corrosion of the metal parts would cause it to stop working. Well, sure, okay, that's the problem. Now, to overcome this corrosion challenge, the team created a conducting polymer metal combination that is revolutionary for vision implants, as it would mean they hopefully could remain functional for the entire implant lifetime. So again, folks, early research, very exciting, with great promise and hope for the future of vision restoration.
Yeah, and the fact that they're talking about, like, you know, a pixel for every one of these, you know, kinds of things, and you could imagine your eyes if it were like a computer screen, Ralph. We see pretty good. I don't remember off the top of my head if we see in, like, you know, 16K or something like that, or probably even better. You know, 1 pixel is a far cry from perfect vision restoration, but I'm sure that for those who are, you know, completely, totally, and utterly blind, you know, 2 pixels would be more than enough to just know, is it light out? Is it dark out? You know, where are things in the room? You know, small things like that make a big difference. So
yeah, you make a good point. Imagine if you had, now again, their goal is to have untold numbers of these little electrodes on these threads, all combined into a single system. So that, with that said, but to your point, that's a good point. Even if this 2 years from now or something, if they can give a blind person the ability to just even discern shapes, to be able just to say, oh, there's a door, maybe not with great resolution, but instead of just banging into the doorway, they can see it, right? And combine that with assistive robot seeing eye dogs, which is another technology that's hotly in development right now worldwide. We have a great hopeful future for those of us who unfortunately have diminished vision or are blind. So there's great hope. That's what we do. We give hope.
there is reason to be hopeful out there. Okay, and speaking of which, story number 4. This has, this is firmly in the realm of medical news. And I'll be honest, Ralph, even after glossing over it, the idea of a bioparticle still just kind of escapes me a little bit. Let's talk about Virginia Tech.
Yes, this is a wonderful story. And you'll find out that this is part of a worldwide effort of research. But let me get to the story. So this comes from the Virginia Tech website, and it was covered by other regular press outlets as well. But Virginia Tech researcher creates a new medical tool to move tiny bioparticles. And the subhead, this is where it gets interesting. Invisible tweezers use robotics and acoustic energy to achieve what human hands cannot. Well, how can you resist that? I had to know. So, little background here. While robotic-assisted surgery has its share of advantages, Virginia Tech professor Zhenhua Tian, his last name is spelled T-I-A-N, Zhenhua Tian, and his team have taken that idea a step beyond its current state. Team members are developing a sound-based method of moving small targets, such as cells and medication, within a body that is non-invasive. That means the method requires no surgical incisions. Now, a little side note from me, Ben, as longtime listeners know, we've covered numerous stories in the past few years about using magnetics to guide and manipulate objects inside the body without the need for surgery. We've talked about that many times. This news represents a remarkable and innovative new sound-based approach. That's the part that just caught my eye.
The idea of the invisible tweezer. Very, very different.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's such a cool analogy, an invisible tweezer. The secret is found in acoustic energy emitters that Tian's team uses to surround and capture particles, working like invisible tweezers. The emitters create 3D acoustic vortex fields. I'll stop. This is very geeky stuff. And I have in the show notes an in-depth explanation of this that I got from a Copilot search. But anyway, let's pick up. The emitters create 3D acoustic vortex fields that can pass through barriers such as bone and tissue, crossing over one another to form tiny ring-shaped acoustical traps. This is very heady stuff. So a side note, based on Copilot response, you can learn all about what are acoustic vortices, and that's in the show notes. So come out to computeramerica.com and get that information if you want to dive deeper. But the nut of this is really just amazingly fascinating. I have very quickly visualize in your mind kind of a corkscrew of sound waves, creating a trap for particles, and they can then manipulate, rotate, position, and so forth using sound. Oh, wow. So micro to millimeter sized objects caught at the center of an acoustic trap through these acoustic vortex can be moved and rotated, as I just mentioned. By mounting an acoustic vortex emitter onto a robotic platform, the acoustic vortex beam, if you want to call it that, can be moved at the micrometer scale. Wow. Accordingly, the particle trapping area can be precisely set in a 3D space, and moving a particle after its capture can be engineered. For example, when moving a tiny object along the winding path of a blood vessel, this can be a critical feature. Fascinating. Isn't that something? Just that one example makes you go, oh, I get it. While Tian's team is able to move a small object behind a solid structure like bone mass, the acoustic vortex beams can also move particles within both gases and liquids as well. What's not to like? And then, although the current approach targets small particles within those substances, integrating the acoustic energy emitters together with robotics has applications beyond surgery and very small particles, including, and this is just a partial part of the list that's in the article, including controlling microbots, which we've talked about doing with magnetics prior to this story. So controlling microbots could be a possibility, handling delicate bioparticles such as cells, arranging nanomaterials for composite fabrication, and so much more. Again, come out to computeramerica.com. And I also inserted in the show notes with some additional research, another article talking about sound for internal medicine research. And check that article out as well. It's very, very interesting stuff. But Ben, again, there's great hope if we just trust science to take us to a new level of great future.
Being able to deliver, the chemical, the drug, the helpful substance to exactly where you need it, instead of just, putting it all over the body. You could imagine treatments getting much more precise and, much more delicate and intricate, instead of just, throw the whole thing at it. So, hey, a lot of breakthroughs that can come from that. And I'm sure so many more that I cannot even fathom. But speaking of more than I can fathom, you go beyond just 4 stories. And for those who are following along, you may notice that the show notes don't end there, but rather you have honorable mentions. And as we always say, these are not worse. These are not, second place. These are not, participation awards. These are just things that we don't have time for, because we try to keep our podcast, to a reasonable size. And let's go ahead and just tell the nice folks the headlines, Ralph, for these stories.
Yeah, again, at the show notes, you can get the links and see the pictures and all this good stuff. First one comes from interestingengineering.com. Headline: New air-to-water converter uses solar power to deliver 19 liters of water a day. This new solar-based air-to-water dispenser by Drinking Maker, run together as one word, can also dehumidify and purify the air. Holy smokes. Now, we've talked about over the past number of years these devices, this technology research to take the water that's in the air, even if you're in the desert, and making it into a drinkable water. Mm-hmm. So that's not new. What I like about this story, Ben, is this is a commercially available, ready-to-go product. You can see in the picture. And it's also a multi-purpose thing, and it's solar power based. Everything about this is really intriguing. Check that story out. It's really, really fun.
I I like the price of that one, by the way. I just couldn't resist. I had to go into the story and kind of see it. So it's a dehumidifier / filter that you can then drink, which Ralph, I live in a very humid place. I've had to dump that water out myself, and it's just, I'm like, I wish I could drink this, but I guess someone else thought it and then did something about it. So very good to them.
It's a cool looking machine. It kind of looks like a cross between an air fryer and a coffee machine.
Good.
It's really cool. So the next story comes from MIT, good old MIT News. They're a website, which is wonderful, by the way, of course. Headline: physicists create 5-lane superhighway for electrons, involving a material that is a unique form of graphene, good old graphene. The work could lead to ultra-efficient electronics and more. This is real nascent, real early research stuff, folks. So check that one out. That's very, very interesting from good old MIT. Mm-hmm. And then here, next story comes from, of all things, PC Gamer. This was sort of a fun thing. Headline: researchers have developed a type of flash memory storage that can withstand temperatures higher than the surface of Venus. And at first you might go, oh, okay, that's nice. No, if you think about data farms and so forth, other applications where they're constantly having to battle heat. If you could have flash memory storage that can withstand incredible temperatures, this could be a very, very helpful thing for the industry. So it's a very good development as well. And that's the end of our honorable mentions for this week.
Yeah, no, and the matter of heat is, of course, very important. Just being able to, not have to cool them down to 30 degrees or 60 degrees, wherever they keep those things at. Very cool. In fact, Ralph, I will say all of your stories today, very cool. And if you want to check out those show notes, it'll be up on our site. And of course, wherever you can hear this, the show notes, a small form of them will be right below the podcast. But the best way to find it is computeramerica.com. So everyone, until next time, I want to thank you so much, Ralph. I want to thank everyone out there for listening. And I hope you have a great and wonderful weekend. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get to it. Have a good one. Bye, everyone.